Well, I think humor works in this way. It not only tells us how to understand things, it tells something about the limits of our understanding. It usually uses incongruity. In other words, humor can't just be something that's absolutely normal. It has to deviate from the normal. And it uses some incongruity, but that incongruity just can't be anything. It has to be appropriate. So let me just give you some really simple examples, like a riddle. When is a door not a door? When it's ajar. Okay, that's a silly little riddle, but we understand that you have this incongruity. You have a door that's not a door. The interesting thing about humor is that in humor, in logic, something is A or not A. In humor, it's both A and not A. Let's take my cartoon, a cartoon of mine, well-known cartoon man. There's a guy on the phone, and he's looking at his Rolodex, and he's saying, "No, Thursday's out. How about never is never good for you?" Now let's look at that. What's the incongruity there? The incongruity is, it wouldn't be funny if he's saying, "I don't want to see you." Right? That's what he is saying, right? But he's saying it politely. So the two things that exist, what's been called a cognitive synergy, that don't completely resolve is the message is rude and the form is polite. The message is rude and the form is polite. That's why when I did the cartoon, I didn't say, "No, Thursday's out, how about never?" I say, "Is never good for you?" It continues that. So you're bringing things together that don't usually go together and that can't logically go together. You can't both be polite and rude. Here you are both, in fact, being polite and rude. So I think we delight in that. And we also delight in, through jokes, we delight in these synergies, these paradoxes that don't resolve themselves. For example, but we make it funny by also bringing in the emotional factor of people. For instance, it's a paradox to say this sentence is false, but there's nothing funny about it, right? This sentence is false. We say, "Oh, that's interesting. It's false, but it's true, but it's false." To make it funny, there's a wonderful Alex Gregory cartoon from The New Yorker in which it's a boss, a Hollywood boss, and he's saying to the guy in front of him, "Dave, I'm not going to lie to you. I'm going to lie to you." So you have that, you have that essential thing. Now, in terms of incongruity, and by appropriate congruity, it's appropriate, but it's not completely appropriate to logic. I can do that by extending the riddle thing. The door, not a door, it's a jar. Okay, everyone understand that. But how about a riddle, like this? What's gray and comes in a jar? Liquid elephant. Well, now one of the things is you can see it along a continuum of incongruity, where there's some resolution. It wouldn't make sense if I said mayonnaise. That would certainly be incongruous, right? But there's still something there. Or even taking it further absurdly and saying, why is there only one Eiffel Tower? And the answer, because it eats its young. Okay, now, so that's very, very strange. There's still some attachment. We understood if there was an animal that eats young, it would be maybe alone. So the constituents of humor there's really three different theories, actually, when you get down. There's a superiority theory, which Hobbes, who was, of course, a theorist of power, said it's the sudden glory we feel when we see an eminence in ourselves compared to an inferiority in someone else. The fat guy slipping on the banana peel. Now, a lot of humor has superiority, and a lot doesn't. And, the holy grail of humor is find the necessary and sufficient conditions for it. Well, if it was sufficient to have superiority, every time we saw a homeless person or a beggar, we laugh, and we don't. So I think people confuse the fact that we often have an aggressive content in humor with thinking that it's either necessary, or sufficient. The thing that does seem, then there's the sort of the relief theories of Freud, which is basically that we're sort of this cauldron of desires, aggression, and sexuality, and humor enables us to actually sort of subvert the moral dilemma of aggression by being distracted by the joke. which either expresses sexuality, aggression, and then there's this incongruity theory, which says that it's something either ambiguous that doesn't fit that somehow is made to fit. I think you, in a way, to really understand it and not understand it scientifically, but in some comprehensive way, you see that these are all parts that go into it. Well, I think what uniquely is our ambivalence, in the fact that we're multiple selves and we all have different agendas. You know, there's something called Grice's maxims, and I can't remember all of them, but basically they say, do not say what you believe to be false. Do not exaggerate. You know, be brief, be informative. And that's good for a lot of discourses like science and stuff. It's actually quite bad for a lot of communication with people in which we don't know what they think and they don't know what we think. And humor is a way in which we can use ambiguity to probe ideas and to straightforward language often leads to some decision, when often the most important thing is not to do something but just stand there. Interestingly, humor, versus anger and fear is sort of an immobilizing response. It really tells we don't do anything. I'll give you an example of how language works in an ambivalent way between me and my wife. Actual conversation. We renovated our house, and my wife's very neat. I'm very sloppy, so we decided, you know what? My studio is going to be outside the house. So a very nice studio was created outside the house. Inside the house, so I have my green chair, my old green chair. And so my wife says, hey, now we made the house so nice, why don't we get rid of that ratty green chair of yours? Or, I said, what do you mean? I love this chair. I love it. She said, well, if you like it so much, why don't you take it out to your studio? I said, I don't want this nasty thing out there. Okay, that actually shows our contradictory feelings. But instead of getting into locking horns about it, we realize, well, you know what? Let's negotiate. Let's compromise. And humor is full of paradox, and our lives are full of paradox. The line between humor and bad taste is your audience, in which some people will find everything offensive and some people will find nothing offensive. But the truth is that most humor originates in what would be called bad taste. When you look at the origins of humor in Greek comedy, which followed the tragedy, which was very, very obscene. The satyr plays, huge phalluses, people running around, very, 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 very aggressive, basically coming out of, drunken revel rituals, the Feast of Fools, the Lord of Misrule, Punch and Judy shows, all actually draw on this primitive side of humor, which I talked about before, that it comes out of fear and aggression. It's a way to negotiate that. So they deal very, very strongly with creating situations that are fearful, aggressive, or transgressive. So the audience is important. Going to a Chris Rock concert is very different than opening the pages of the New Yorker. The most offensive thing that ever occurred in the New Yorker would seem like the mildest thing at a Chris Rock concert.